My name is Evelyn Ray Morgan. I'm 30, and for too long my family mistook my silence for permission. It started like it always does, casual suggestions disguised as fate. Amber, my sister, tossed it out first. We should do a family trip to Greece. Like a decision had already been made in a room I wasn't invited to. Mom sighed theatrically about how we never do anything as a unit anymore, the kind of line she uses when she wants something to sound moral. Dad did his usual silent nod that means he isn't listening but wants credit for presence. And Jason, 17, brand new confidence, sat there like he already belonged in our history. I know my role, the wallet with a pulse. Flights, hotels, transfers, dinners, excursions, all those things people post with captions about family. If you squint, family looks a lot like funding. They didn't even ease into it this time. Mom started sending me Santorini beaches at sunrise. Amber sent a checklist of what we'll do there. Jason mentioned he'd never left the country, like my heart was supposed to do the work my bank had already done for years. I waited longer than I usually do, and, just like every time, I caved. I booked it all. Round-trip tickets, 3 islands, 2 connecting suites with sea views, private transfers, catamaran cruise, dinner reservations, down to the last detail. Just under $4,000, not counting the deposit. Nobody offered to cover meals. Nobody asked if I could. Nobody asked if I wanted to. I told myself maybe this time it would be different. Maybe they'd be grateful without the undertone that makes thank you feel like instructions for next time. 2 days before the flight, I stopped by my parents' place to drop off printed itineraries and adapters. I walked in like I always have. Their house, their rules, but I never needed to knock. They were in the living room, laughing. I heard my name before I saw their faces. "Evelyn's such a pushover," Amber said, like it was a cute habit. She's practically begging to be used." Jason laughed. "She's got no one else. Paying for us is how she belongs." Mom finished it, smooth as sugar. "Let her pay. It makes her feel important." I stepped into the doorway and they looked at me like I was late to the joke I funded. Amber didn't miss a beat. "Don't bother packing for Greece," she said, bright and cold. "It's a family trip." Mom gave me this strange little smile. "You'll understand one day." I smiled back. "Of course." I sat down. I asked what they were excited to see. I recommended a taverna on Paros. I reminded them about plugs and customs and the thing with the bread plates. I did it all with steady hands, and a voice nobody noticed was too calm. None of them suspected anything. Why would they? You don't question gravity until the floor moves. That night, I opened the hotel portal and canceled everything. 25% of the deposit vanished into the Aegean. I didn't care. Then I called the bank and cut the last forgotten cord, the emergency line of credit they still piggybacked on. Snip. No fury. No fireworks. Just quiet. The next day, I showed up to help them pack. Smiled, labeled luggage tags, told them to send pictures. I drove them to the airport on Saturday, sunny and solicitous, and wished them the best vacation of their lives. They boarded believing humiliation only travels one direction. At 6:02 a.m., my phone buzzed. "Fix this, Jason." I watched the notification fade off my lock screen like a tide that only goes out. An hour later, my phone was a field of missed calls and voicemails. Mom sounded confused, asking if I made a mistake with the confirmation. Amber sounded furious, humiliated at the front desk of a 5-star hotel that didn't have a reservation for us. She called me selfish, entitled, a child. By 8:14 a.m., they started trying my old card. Declined. Then again. Declined. 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 At 10:45, Mom texted, "Why would you do this?" No question mark. No curiosity. I left her on red and went to buy a croissant. The barista asked how my morning was going. "Lighter," I said, and meant it. I know exactly what was happening to them. Panic. Scrambling. Mom can't book anything without a printed itinerary. Amber doesn't travel without pre-checked bags and color-coded plans. Jason, last I checked, barely has a debit card. Dad probably stood off to the side, scrolling, pretending. Somewhere in the heat of Athens, near a counter that smelled like marble and paper, they realized this wasn't a mistake. It was a mirror. Jason texted again. "You need to fix this right now." I typed 3 words. "Book it yourself." No punctuation, no warmth, just a boundary you could stub your toe on. Then I turned off my phone and walked through the market. I bought a plant for my kitchen. paused at the stall where an old man sells film cameras. He asked if I wanted to try one. I told him I'm learning to take pictures of things that actually belong to me. People think revenge feels like fireworks. Sometimes it's a window opening in a quiet room, air where there wasn't any. That afternoon, I sat on my balcony and let the light cross my thighs in long rectangles. My phone was face down inside. Across town, a house full of people who love free comfort finally met the cost of it. Humiliation, I learned, is a bilingual word. It speaks fluently to the giver and the taker, just not on the same day. The thing about boundaries is that the first time you hold one, everyone treats it like an emergency. When I finally turned my phone face up again, the lock screen looked like an EKG in cardiac arrest. Missed calls, stacked like teeth. Voicemails queued in uneven breaths. Texts from 3 people who had never learned how to ask, only how to direct. I pressed play. Mom first. Soft voice, small tremor. Evelyn, sweetheart. They're saying the reservation isn't showing. Could you double check? Maybe the confirmation code changed. We're at the front desk. Just call me. Next, Amber. No tremor. This is humiliating. They're staring at us like we're scammers. I told you the dates 3 times. Fix it. Then Jason, each message a little more frantic, a little more entitled, like a metronome speeding up. They don't have our names. Your card isn't going through. We can't just stand here. And finally, the 2 words that sounded like a habit he wasn't old enough to have. Fix this. I sat with my back against the counter, the morning light slanting over my knees, and imagined the marble lobby in Athens, cool as a cathedral, the staff with their practiced patience, Amber's posture sharpening, Mom's hand searching her purse for papers she believed were proof of her innocence, Jason glancing toward the revolving door like salvation might come walking through it. I made coffee. The plant I'd bought yesterday looked ridiculous and alive on my windowsill, a small green argument for staying. The kettle clicked. I could feel the part of me that used to panic wake up and reach for its old shoes, explain, apologize, rescue, repeat. But that part had aged out of my body overnight. It didn't fit anymore. I listened to the rest of the voicemails. Dad didn't speak. He never leaves recordings. He saves his neutrality for in-person delivery, like a package he doesn't want to sign for. By 8:14 a.m., the failed charges began hitting my inbox like gray stones. Attempt declined. Attempt declined. Attempt declined. The old family emergencies card they thought still lived for them had been severed cleanly, which is how real endings happen. Quietly, with a single cut. Out of habit, I opened social media and closed it just as fast. I didn't need to watch the prelude to the narrative rewrite. People who depend on your silence always have a backup story. They keep it in their glove compartment like a spare. A discreet buzz from Noah. You good? My chest softened. I typed back, yes, I'm fine. Then, because he always lets me choose my own pace, I added, family is in Athens. Hotel is not. He sent a single dot, then, proud of you. No questions, no micromanaging. The antidote to a lifetime of being managed. I left the phone on the table and took a long, methodical shower, the kind where you press your forehead to the tile and wait for the heat to tell you the truth. This is not cruelty. This is clarity. When I returned, Amber had escalated to fury so pure it almost sounded clean. Do you understand what you've done? We look like idiots. We have luggage. It's August. It's Greece. I could picture the slip of paper theatrics at the front desk, the managerial apologies that are really refusals, the quiet click of a keyboard searching for a booking that had been lifted out of existence. At 10:45, Mom tried again. Why would you do this? 4 words stripped of their punctuation, like she couldn't decide if she was asking or accusing. It would have been funny if it hadn't been a summary of our whole life together, statements dressed as questions, demands dressed as love. I didn't answer. Instead, I went out. The city had its own temperature, a mercy of shade every few storefronts. I bought a notebook I didn't need, and an orange I did. I watched a little boy in a red shirt chase a pigeon that was never his to catch. I let myself be a person with a morning. Back at home, I opened the laptop, not to fix anything, but to look at numbers that only belonged to me. People don't tell you this, but responsibility feels different when it's chosen. It stops tasting like metal and starts tasting like water. Another buzz. We found a place for one night. It's disgusting. You owe us for the difference. That one, Jason again. The audacity almost charmed me. I could hear him saying it, jaw clenched around the word "owe," like the last piece of gum in his mouth. I typed the only sentence that still belonged to me. Book it yourself. Sent. Silence. Then the chorus resumed. Call me, call me, call me, until I turned the phone over and let it breathe. At noon, I walked to the small museum no one visits on weekdays. I stood in front of a painting of a blue door for too long. The plaque said the door used to open to a house that no longer stood. I took a picture anyway. Not for them, for me. Proof that doors can be beautiful, even when they go nowhere. A cloud moved across the sun. You would think freedom would sound like music, but it sounds like elastic returning to form. Noah's name lit my phone again. Dinner later? I thought about how a yes can be a glass of water and a no can be a lock turning. Yes, I wrote. 7. When I finally let the voicemails catch up with me that afternoon, the edges were duller. Shock had curdled into blame, blame into insult. Amber called me selfish, entitled, a child. Recitations from the Book of Projection. Mom tried on gentleness like a dress she never quite fit. Honey, we're a family. Families help each other. The word help snagged in my throat. Help had always been a one-way street with my name misspelled at the end. They made it through one night somehow. I imagined cheap air conditioning and a window that opened onto a brick wall, the kind of hotel where the towels come in the color of surrender. In the morning, there would be a fight over coffee, a cheap taxi, a frantic search for a flight home. They would calculate the loss in money and never tally the cost that mattered, the habit that ended. I didn't wait for updates. I watered the plant. I cleaned the sink. I sat at the table and tried to remember the last time I'd spent a day not bracing for someone else's emergency. Couldn't place it. Evening started to gather itself at the edges. I texted Noah the name of a place with dim lights, where the servers remember faces but don't ask questions. He sent a thumbs up and a heart, the kind of shorthand that doesn't require translation. One more buzz I didn't expect. An old mutual from college, the kind who thrives on the gentle sport of unverified news. Weird question. Are you okay? Heard a story that your booking got overbooked and it wasn't your fault at all. There it was. The first draft of the rewrite. Innocence by logistics. Blameless by accident. A softer lie they could live with. I'm great, I sent back. Nothing to feed, nothing to starve. Before I left for dinner, I stood at the mirror and practiced a face I didn't know I had. Calm, without apology. My hair did what it wanted. I let it. On the dresser, my notebook lay open to a single line I'd written without thinking. I won't explain myself to people committed to misunderstanding me. It looked theatrical when I read it back, but it felt like oxygen. At the restaurant, Noah didn't ask for a postmortem. He ordered us olives and bread and told me a stupid story about a client who thinks a spreadsheet is a living thing. I laughed. An actual laugh that didn't check the room first. When the server poured wine, I caught my reflection in the side of the bottle. Someone slightly more in color than the day before. Any fallout? He asked eventually, not curious so much as careful. Not yet, I said, but there will be. I told him about the lobby in Athens I could see without seeing. I told him about the texts, the heat, the way fixed this sounded like scripture to a church I didn't attend anymore. He reached across the table with a palm-up simplicity that still undoes me. You don't have to turn your phone on tonight. I nodded. I didn't. When I got home, the sky had turned the color of a bruise that's almost healed. On impulse, I opened my messages. Not the family thread, not the old echo chamber, but a name I hadn't thought about in months. Tessa Quinn, Noah's ex. We are not friends, not enemies. We exist at a polite distance, carved by time and choice, but she is woven through the edges of our circles tight enough to catch rumors. There was a DM from her sitting there like a coin on a step. Hey, random. Someone from your family reached out to me today. Wanted context about Noah and me. Thought you should know. I stared at the screen a long time, not angry, not surprised, just aware. If humiliation can't reach you one way, it will audition another. Thanks for telling me, I wrote back. I'm good. I turned off the phone and slid it under a book. The apartment hummed its small night noises. On the counter, a single glass waited, catching the last of the light. I didn't owe anyone anything. Not an explanation, not a fix, not a version of me that made their life cheaper. I locked the door out of habit and stood there a second with my hand on the bolt, feeling what it means to secure something that is actually yours. Families who live on borrowed comfort always think a boundary is a betrayal. Maybe to them it is. To me, it is a beginning. They came back 2 days later. No postcard, no message of survival, just the thud of luggage wheels across my parents' driveway, reported secondhand by my landlord, who lives 2 doors down. He texted, "Your family looks sunburned." That was the entire message. It made me laugh, the way understatement sometimes saves you. By the time I finally saw them again, the sunburn had peeled into something duller. Anger is a color that fades fast once it realizes it won't get fed. Dad called first, his tone careful, official. "We'd like to talk." Not "you owe us an explanation," not even "come home." Just the diplomatic phrasing of a man who's been volunteered as messenger. So I went. I told myself it was closure, but curiosity is just nostalgia with better PR. When I stepped inside, nobody said hello. They were already gathered in the living room like actors rehearsing a grievance. Mom in her robe, hair tied back too tight. Amber with crossed legs, and the kind of expression she wears when she's about to weaponize disappointment. Jason on the couch edge, chewing gum like it was courage. Dad sitting upright, palms pressed together as if prayer could disguise complicity. No one offered me a seat. I stayed standing. Distance, in certain rooms, is the only luxury you get to keep. Mom started first. "What you did was deeply disrespectful, Evelyn. You embarrassed this family." The phrasing hit me harder than the tone. This family, as if I wasn't already in it. Amber followed like a lawyer rehearsing for applause. "You ruined everything. You humiliated us in another country. You're vindictive and cruel." Jason muttered, "It was messed up." Even now, he couldn't find adult words for the feeling of losing free comfort. They spoke in layers, a chorus of blame that couldn't decide on harmony. And when the noise reached its predictable pitch, I let them have it. "I heard everything," I said. The room fell still. "I was standing in the hallway when you called me a pushover, when you said I'm begging to be used, when you laughed about how lucky you were to have someone dumb enough to fund your lives." The silence after was heavy enough to measure. Mom tried first, that soft deflection that only mothers who never apologize have perfected. "Oh, sweetheart, that was a joke. We were venting. You took it too personally." I looked at her. Which part was the joke, exactly? She's got no one else? Or let her pay, it makes her feel important. Amber rolled her eyes. "You're blowing it out of proportion. You always twist things." Jason shrugged, maybe thinking invisibility could pass for innocence. Dad just stared at his clasped hands, a study in selective cowardice. "You said I embarrassed the family," I told them. "But the truth is, I stopped volunteering to be the punchline." Jason muttered again. "You could have just said no." I turned to him. "I could have, yay. But then you'd still think I was weak. This way, you learn something." He flinched like he didn't expect the answer to hit. Mom's eyes glossed over, not from guilt, but from the exhaustion of being challenged. "You didn't have to punish everyone." "I didn't punish you," I said quietly. "I just stopped rewarding bad behavior." No one spoke after that. The walls absorbed the heat like old skin. I could hear the faint ticking of a clock that never seemed to move when I was in that house. Finally, I said, "From now on, you pay your own way. No more flights, no more hotels, no more pretending generosity is obligation." And then I left. No one followed. No one told me to wait. The only sound was the door closing behind me, a small, clean noise that felt bigger than forgiveness. I thought that was the end. But endings with my family always have post-credit scenes. That night, someone knocked on my door. It was Dad. He looked like he'd been sent, not convinced. He didn't ask to come in, just stood on the porch, shifting from foot to foot. The porch light carved shadows into the wrinkles he pretends not to have. "Your mother's upset," he said. "We all are. What you did, it's disappointing." That word again, meant to sound calm, designed to cut. He added, "You made a spectacle. Your mother hasn't stopped crying. Amber's devastated. Jason." I stopped him. "Dad, please, don't recite their feelings like they're facts." He cleared his throat. "You could have just talked to us." I laughed softly. "Did you ever plan to talk to me before you laughed at me? Before you let them treat me like an idiot with a wallet?" He sighed. Amber didn't mean it. She has a sharp tongue. Jason's young, doesn't know better. And what's your excuse? I asked. That shut him up. After a moment, he reached into his jacket and handed me an envelope. Jason insisted, he said. Inside was a personal check for $960, the exact amount I'd lost canceling the hotel. Jason's name signed in clumsy ink. I didn't say a word. Didn't ask why it wasn't from all of them. Didn't ask what kind of lesson they thought this transaction would teach. I just folded it once and walked back inside, closing the door slowly, deliberately, the way you end a prayer you never believed in. Later that night, my phone lit up again. Mom, we raised you better than this. Of all the sentences she could have chosen, that one landed the deepest, not because it was true, but because she believed it. Like I was an ungrateful creation that had gone rogue. Like my refusal to keep funding their peace was proof that I'd failed her. I sat there for a long minute, phone warm in my hand, and then typed my reply. No, you raised me to stay quiet. I raised myself to stop. Then I blocked her number. The room went still, the kind of still that comes after a storm. Not silence, exactly, but aftermath. I leaned back against the wall, listening to the hum of my fridge, the faint pulse of city noise outside, and for the first time in years, I realized something simple. Peace doesn't roar. It whispers. They'd probably spend the next few days rehearsing new versions of me. The villain, the bitter daughter, the cold one who changed after money. But I was done auditioning for their approval. The check was still on the counter, folded like a secret. I didn't cash it. Didn't rip it up either. Just let it sit there, a small paper monument to everything they owed me that money could never cover. The next morning, I woke up to quiet so thick it felt staged. No calls, no texts, no familiar guilt pings from Mom's number, trying to crawl back into relevance. Just the faint mechanical hum of a house adjusting to its new emptiness. It should have felt like victory, but it didn't. Silence from manipulators feels peaceful for exactly 5 minutes. Then it starts sounding like exile. I went about my day anyway. Cooked breakfast, watered the plant that somehow hadn't died yet, went to work. And still, between the small tasks, my brain reached for its old routine. Check if they need something. That instinct doesn't die easily. You have to starve it. By the end of the week, the silence had evolved. Not reconciliation, not reflection, just absence. Strategic, collective, deliberate. No one in my family reached out, but the world around them started whispering on their behalf. It began with a coworker. She leaned across the office divider, voice lowered like gossip was an act of compassion. I heard your sister had a rough trip, she said. Something about a mix-up at the hotel. So embarrassing. But she said you handled it so gracefully. Gracefully. The word hung there, polished and false, like perfume sprayed over smoke. I smiled. Sounds like it. She didn't know that handled gracefully meant canceling every comfort they'd ever borrowed and watching them drown in the shallow end of accountability. That afternoon, I checked Instagram. Amber had posted a photo from an old trip, Italy, 2 summers ago. Our whole family at a restaurant terrace, glasses raised mid-laughter. Her caption read, "When vacations were about love, not control, no tag." But I was right there in the picture, smiling like an unpaid extra in someone else's movie. The comments flooded in. Beautiful family. So much love here. And then, the one that stung, even though I knew better. Where's your sister? Amber replied, some people change. 3 words. An entire assassination, clean and public. I locked my phone, sat still for a full minute, then reopened it, not to engage, but to unfollow. Peace sometimes looks like indifference, but it's actually surgery. Later that night, I opened Netflix, 3 profiles gone. Only mine remained. Hulu signed out. Amazon Group removed me. Cloud storage, the one I'd set up years ago for their backups, still linked. For a moment, I hovered over it, considering whether I should let it stay as a digital olive branch. Then I logged in and deleted the entire account. Not revenge. Release. An hour later, the silence broke. Amber. Wow. Petty much? 10 minutes later. You really think this makes you better than us? Enjoy your lonely life. Jason chimed in soon after. You owe her an apology. She didn't deserve this. That one actually made me laugh. Deserve what? A free vacation? A human ATM? The right to insult me and still expect concierge service? I didn't reply. The next day, a neighbor told me she'd seen Jason mowing my parents' lawn, shirt off, earbuds in, settled like a tenant instead of a temporary guest. Apparently, Mom had started referring to him as family. I almost admired the efficiency. One wallet gone, another placeholder found. At work, someone mentioned seeing my sister at the mall. Seemed fine, they said, smiling, shopping. Of course she was. My absence was her opportunity to rewrite history without the inconvenient presence of truth. But what none of them understood was that silence can be louder than gossip. It echoes until you decide it doesn't. That night, Noah came over. He noticed the folded check still sitting on the counter. "You keeping that as a trophy or a warning?" he asked, half-smile tugging at his mouth. "Both," I said. He nodded. "Looks about right." We ordered Thai food, ate cross-legged on the floor, and didn't talk about my family at all. He didn't tell me I'd done the right thing. Didn't ask if I missed them. He just existed beside me in the calm, which somehow said more than any comfort could. After he left, I opened my messages one last time. Mom hadn't written again. Amber had posted another story, a filtered sunset with text overlay. "Forgive, don't forget." Jason had liked it. Of course he did. I stared at the glow of my phone screen, realizing something that settled like a quiet truth. They hadn't cut me off to punish me. They'd cut me off because they couldn't use me. And for people like them, love without leverage isn't love at all. I deleted our group chat thread. Not archived. Deleted. Gone. When I finally lay down that night, I thought about how families like mine survive on revision. If they repeat a story often enough, they start to believe it. And I realized that maybe the only way to break that cycle wasn't to correct them. It was to outgrow the need to. Weeks passed. Enough days for the silence to harden into routine, for absence to start wearing the shape of peace. But peace, like glass, is always at risk of shattering when you bump into memory. My birthday arrived quietly, 30th plus 1. No calls, no texts, not even a recycled "hope you're doing well" from Mom. It was the first time in my entire life that my phone stayed dark on that day. No family, no noise. And somehow that emptiness was both a wound and a revelation. I made myself coffee, poured it into the chipped mug that had survived every apartment move. The one with the faded print that says, "You don't owe anyone peace but your own." For years, I'd bought that mug ironically. Now it felt prophetic. I scrolled through social media out of habit, even though I knew better. Amber had posted again. A carousel of old photos, all carefully chosen. Smiling faces, shared meals, captions about forgiveness, growth, moving on. I wasn't in a single one. It was like I'd been surgically edited out of our family timeline. Then came the comments. Family over everything. Some people forget their roots. So proud of you for staying positive. The kind of public validation that fills the hole where accountability should be. I could almost hear Mom behind the scenes feeding her lines, curating sympathy like an art form. I didn't react. I'd learned that replying to lies only convinces the liars they still have access. But the world has a way of bringing echoes to your doorstep. That weekend, my friend Josh texted me out of nowhere. "Just ran into your mom at the grocery store," he wrote. "She said you've been struggling, that you let money change you. It got awkward." Then another message. "She called you greedy in front of people." I stared at the screen. No anger this time, just that cold clarity that comes when you finally understand the math of it all. To them, my worth had always been measured in transactions. If I stopped paying, they had to invent a new currency, resentment. I texted Josh back. "Don't worry about it. She's just balancing her budget." He didn't get it, but it made me laugh. The next few days, I noticed subtle shifts. Friends who once called regularly grew quieter. Group chats turned into echo chambers where my messages landed late or not at all. It's strange how fast gossip travels when it's carrying a story people want to believe. I didn't chase it, let them think what they needed to. Because the truth is, I was done performing the version of me that made other people comfortable. Then came the final twist. Quiet, small, and almost elegant. A message request on my phone. Tessa Quinn, Noah's ex. "Hey," she wrote. "Your sister messaged me last week, asked about Noah, said she was worried for you, wanted context, thought you should know." I read it twice. The manipulation was so transparent it was almost artful. Amber couldn't touch me directly, so she went fishing through my present using pieces of my past. And Tessa, sharp enough to recognize poison when she tastes it, had sent the evidence straight to me. Thank you, I replied. Context received. Then I blocked Amber's number for good. It's funny how people think betrayal needs grand gestures. Sometimes it's just a family member sliding into a stranger's DMs, rewriting history, one message at a time. That night, Noah found me on the balcony, barefoot, a glass of wine balanced against the rail. He didn't ask. He just stood next to me, quiet. After a while, he said, "You look lighter." "I am," I said. "I stopped auditioning for forgiveness I didn't need." He nodded, then slipped his hand into mine. Simple, solid, uncomplicated. Below us, the city pulsed with the same rhythm it always had. People moving, lights changing, stories being retold. But for once, none of it demanded me. In the reflection of the window, I saw a woman I barely recognized. Older, maybe, but not broken. The kind of woman who'd learned that sometimes peace doesn't come from fixing what's broken. It comes from leaving the pieces on the floor and walking away barefoot anyway. I whispered it out loud. Not to Noah, not to anyone, just to the night that finally felt like mine. They needed me to be the villain so they could stay the victims. Then I smiled. Let them. Somewhere, far away, a family of 4 probably sat around their kitchen table, telling a version of the story that made them look innocent. Maybe Jason still mowed their lawn. Maybe Amber still scrolled through photos of Greece, convincing herself she was the injured one. Maybe Mom still rehearsed her lines for anyone who'd listen. But me, I was finally the quiet they couldn't control. And for the first time in my life, that silence didn't feel like exile. It felt like freedom.